Elara Voss always knew the last hour of the night belonged to people who didn't want to go home. Not because they loved the taste of ale or the warmth of a crowded room, but because outside the tavern doors, outside the lantern glow, life waited with its sharp edges. Frostmere Crossing had no mercy for anyone with empty pockets, and Elara's pockets had been empty for so long, she sometimes forgot what fullness felt like. She moved through the main room with practiced patience, gathering forgotten cups, wiping sticky rings off the tables, stacking chairs with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been tired for years. The hearth and anchor wasn't hers, not on paper, but she ran it like it was. She knew which floorboard would groan if you stepped wrong. She knew which corner leaked during heavy rain. She knew the exact moment the fire would begin to sulk if you didn't feed it, and she knew old Bram, the owner, would dock her pay again if the place wasn't locked and dark by midnight. Elara glanced at the iron-studded clock above the bar. The minute hand crawled like it enjoyed watching her suffer. 9 minutes. She blew out a slow breath and dragged the rag over the last table near the window, where the glass was always cold even in summer. The river outside ran black this time of night, whispering to itself as it cut through town. Most nights that sound calmed her. Tonight it made her feel watched. The tavern was mostly empty, had been for the past hour. The usual late drunks stumbled home earlier than normal. The traveling merchants who liked to linger had already paid their tabs and left. Even the laughing card players had packed up. It should have been quiet. It should have been easy. Elara reached behind the bar for the oil lamp to dim it when she saw the shadow. A man was still seated, not at the bar, not at the center table where the last stragglers usually tried to charm a free drink out of her. He sat in the far corner, half hidden behind a beam, near the hearth's dying coals, a place Elara had already cleaned. Her spine tightened so fast it felt like a string pulled too hard. She froze, rag in one hand, the other resting on the bar's edge. The doors were locked. She had locked them herself. She remembered the weight of the iron bolt sliding into place. She remembered turning the key and tucking it into the pocket sewn inside her apron. She remembered because she always remembered locks. Locks were the only thing standing between her and the kind of night that ruined you. Yet there he was, already inside, like he'd been there the entire time. Elara swallowed and forced her feet to move. She kept her posture steady, like she wasn't suddenly calculating the distance to the back exit, the reach of the broom handle, and the speed it would take to slam the kitchen door behind her if she had to run. Her voice came out calm only because she'd learned how to hide fear behind courtesy. "We're closed," she said, loud enough to carry, soft enough not to sound like panic. "Last call was an hour ago." The man didn't move. He sat with one arm draped along the back of the booth, shoulders relaxed like he owned the night. His head was angled slightly downward, but Elara could feel his attention. She couldn't explain it, she just knew she had it. A slow heat crawled up the back of her neck. "I'll be locking up," she added, "so you'll need to leave." Still, no movement, not even the shifting of cloth. Elara's grip tightened on the rag until the fabric bunched in her palm. Then, finally, he spoke. "May I sit a moment longer?" His voice was low, rough in a way that didn't sound drunk or careless. It sounded like cold air dragged over stone. Not loud, never loud, but it filled the room anyway, as if the tavern itself listened when he decided to speak. Elara frowned. "You can sit outside." A faint pause, like he was weighing her words. "I'd rather not." Something about that answer made her chest tighten, not because it was threatening, because it was honest. She took one more step forward, careful to keep the bar between them as long as she could. "The doors are locked. How did you—" "I came in earlier," he said, almost gently. "Before the rush thinned, you didn't notice me." Elara hated that she could believe it. Not because she was careless, but because she'd been exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that makes your eyes skim over details, the kind that turns strangers into background noise. She lifted her chin. "You're noticed now." In the dim light, she finally caught a clearer view of him, dark hair, slightly too long, falling loose as if he didn't care to keep it tidy. A coat that looked travel-worn but expensive beneath the wear, stitched with careful strength rather than decoration, hands that didn't fidget, a posture that didn't shrink or seek approval, and eyes, even in the low glow of the dying hearth. His eyes found the light and held it. Gray, not pale gray, not soft. A storm gray that made Alara think of river rocks and winter skies and the moments right before lightning breaks. He looked tired. Not sleepy tired. Tired like a person carrying something they couldn't set down. Ilara's mouth went dry. She'd seen dangerous men before. Frostmere Crossing had plenty of them, men who laughed too loudly, touched too easily, stole more than coin. This man didn't have that energy. His danger felt different, controlled, contained, like a blade she couldn't see but could still feel. Ilara forced herself to speak. If you're not leaving, then you're drinking. That's the only reason anyone sits after closing. His gaze flicked briefly to the rag in her hand, then back to her face. One drink, he said. Ilara let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but wasn't. You people always say one. I mean it, he said. One. She didn't like that she believed him again. What? She asked, bracing herself for a complicated request. Ale? Gin? Something sweet? He didn't answer immediately. He watched her for a beat too long. Then, dark whiskey, neat. Ilara's fingers twitched. Whiskey wasn't the kind of drink most men ordered when they were in the mood to flirt. It wasn't the kind they ordered when they wanted to stay lively. It was the kind people ordered when they wanted the night to stop feeling so loud. Ilara turned, took a glass from the shelf, poured carefully. The liquid caught the lantern light like amber, warm and calm and normal. She held on to that normalcy like it could protect her. When she carried it toward him, she kept her steps measured, refusing to rush. He didn't reach for her. He didn't lean in. He didn't do any of the things men did when they wanted to turn a late-night drink into a power game. He simply lifted his hand and took the glass from her with the kind of restraint that made her realize he could have been much worse. Ilara stepped back quickly, returning to the edge of the bar like it was home base. He didn't drink right away. He held the glass, staring down into it like it had answers. Ilara's patience thinned. So, one drink. You sit. You leave. That's the deal. His mouth moved, barely, a shape that wasn't quite a smile. You have a habit, he said. Ilara narrowed her eyes. Of what? Of doing what you must, he replied, even when you're angry about it. She didn't like being read, not by anyone. Especially not by a stranger in the last hour of the night. You don't know anything about me, she said. He finally took a sip. Not a gulp, just enough to taste, enough to prove he wasn't playing. Then he set the glass down gently, like he respected the wood beneath it. I know you're counting minutes, he said. I know you're trying to finish before your employer finds a reason to punish you again. Ilara felt the blood drain from her face. That wasn't a guess. That was accurate. She forced her voice to stay steady. You've been listening? I've been noticing, he corrected. Ilara's heart beat once, hard. A thought came sharp and unwelcome. How long have you been noticing? She had seen him before. Maybe that was the worst part. Now that she looked properly, she could place him, those last few nights, seated in the same corner, quiet, unremarkable until you paid attention. Ilara's fingers curled around the rag again. Why are you here? He lowered his gaze for a moment, as if deciding whether truth was safe. Then he looked back up. I'm searching for someone, he said. Ilara almost laughed. Then you're in the wrong town. Frostmere doesn't keep people. It chews them up and spits them out. His eyes didn't leave hers. I think she passed through here, he said, or someone brought her through here. Ilara's throat tightened. Who? He hesitated. Just a breath. That hesitation felt heavier than any dramatic confession. She's family, he said finally, and she disappeared. Ilara felt something inside her shift. Old instinct, old pain, old warning. People disappeared all the time. Frostmere Crossing was a crossroads. You could vanish easily if you knew how. But the way he said it, family, made the word sound like a wound. Ilara kept her face blank. Then you should speak to the watch. He gave a slow shake of his head. I have. And? They asked for coin. Then they asked for favors. Then they asked questions that weren't theirs to ask. Ilara's mouth tightened. That's Frostmere. His gaze lowered to her hands, not her face, her hands. Ilara instinctively tucked them closer to her body. The air in the tavern seemed to tighten, as if even the fire was listening now. His voice was quiet when he spoke again. Ilara Voss. Her breath caught. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her name wasn't something she gave strangers. Her name wasn't something that floated loosely in conversation. Her name was something she guarded because names led to histories, and histories led to the kind of attention that killed you. He watched her expression closely, like he'd been waiting to see exactly how she'd react. Ilara forced out a single word. Who are you? The man's fingers flexed lightly around the glass. He didn't look pleased with himself. He looked resigned. My name is Kale Ardent, he said, and I'm not here to hurt you. Ilara let out a humorless breath. That's what they all say. Kale didn't argue. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out something wrapped in dark cloth. Ilara's pulse spiked. Her body screamed, don't. Don't look, don't ask, don't touch. But she couldn't stop watching. He unwrapped the cloth slowly, carefully, like the object inside mattered. A small thing lay in his palm. Not jewelry, not a weapon. A simple braided cord, worn with time, threaded with a tiny charm made of pale metal. Ilara's vision blurred at the edges, not because she was dizzy, because the cord felt like a tug inside her bones, as if it recognized her in a way she never allowed anyone else to. Kale placed it on the table between them, far enough away that he wasn't pushing it into her space, close enough that she could see every detail. I believe you can tell me where she went, he said softly. Ilara stared at the cord. Her hands began to tremble. No, she whispered before she could stop herself. Kale's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped even lower, gentler. You don't have to answer tonight, he said. But I think you already know what this is. Ilara swallowed hard, trying to force her breathing steady. She didn't want to know, because knowing meant seeing. And seeing meant remembering the reason her mother died. Kyle leaned back, giving her space like he understood she might bolt. Then he said the one sentence that made Ilara's blood turn cold. I've been looking for her for 2 years, he murmured, and if I'm right, I'm running out of time. Ilara's eyes flicked up to his. Those storm-gray eyes held something raw behind the control. Fear, grief, a kind of quiet desperation that wasn't performative. Ilara should have told him to leave. She should have grabbed the broom handle and called the watch. She should have done anything except what she did next. But her gaze dropped back to the cord, and the pull inside her bones tightened. Ilara's lips parted. Her voice came out small. If I touch it, she began. Kale didn't interrupt. He didn't rush her. He waited. Ilara's throat tightened. If I touch it, she whispered again. I can't always control what I see. Kyle nodded once, slow, like he respected the cost. Then don't touch it yet, he said. Ilara blinked, startled. He lifted the whiskey again, took another quiet sip, and with his eyes still on her, he asked, Tell me one thing, Ilara Voss. Do you want to stay trapped here forever? Ilara's chest tightened so hard it hurt, because the terrifying part was, he was right, and the cord on the table was still calling to her, like it already knew her hands were going to betray her. If you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or treated like your worth was something others could decide, stay with this story. And tap like now, so more people who need this reminder can find it. Ilara did not touch the cord. She stood there breathing through the tightness in her chest, Fingers clenched around the damp rag like it was the only solid thing left in the room. The braided cord sat between them on the table, quiet and harmless looking, yet it hummed beneath her skin the way storms hummed before breaking. Cale did not move it closer. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Most men pushed when they smelled weakness. They leaned in, filled silence with pressure, demanded answers like they were owed. Cale did none of that. He leaned back instead, one arm resting loosely on the booth, his body angled away just enough to give her room. Alara hated that her fear eased because of it. She circled behind the bar, kneading the familiar weight of wood and bottles between them. Her pulse thudded loud in her ears. She told herself to focus on practical things: the smell of old smoke, the scrape of her boots on the floor, the fact that the clock now read 2 minutes past midnight. "You asked if I want to stay trapped here forever," she said finally, keeping her eyes on the shelf as she set the rag down. "That's not your question to ask." Cale didn't argue. "No," he said quietly, "but it's still the right one." Alara scoffed, a brittle sound. "You don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking," he replied. "I'm not asking you to save anyone. Not yet. I'm asking whether you want the kind of life that keeps shrinking, or the kind that costs something up front." That made her laugh, sharp and humorless. "Everything costs something." "Yes," Kyle agreed, "but not everything gives something back." Alara turned then, finally facing him fully. The lantern light caught the edges of his face, carving him into shadow and silver. She searched for mockery, for manipulation. She found neither. Her gaze dropped again, betraying her, drawn back to the cord. "Where did you get it?" she asked. Cale's jaw tightened. "From the last place she was seen freely." That answer carried weight. Not last seen alive, not last seen safe. Just freely. Alara swallowed. "And you think I can tell you where she went from that?" "I think," Cale said carefully, "that you can tell me something no tracker, no informant, no blade for hire can." Alara shook her head. "You don't know what this does to people like me." "I know enough," he said. Her laugh died in her throat. "Do you?" Kyle studied her for a long moment before answering. "I know that people who have gifts they didn't ask for are usually punished for them, used, burned, buried, or all three." Alara's breath hitched. That wasn't rumor-level knowledge. That was lived knowledge. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, ashen, terrified, defiant even as they dragged her away. The smell of smoke, the sound of people justifying cruelty because it made them feel safer. Alara pressed her palm flat against the bar, grounding herself. "You don't know me," she said again, quieter now. "You don't know what happens when I touch things like that." "I know you survive it," Cale said. She looked up sharply. "What?" "You're still here," he said simply. "Which means whatever it shows you hasn't broken you yet." Alara stared at him. That wasn't encouragement. That was respect. She hated how deeply it landed. Her gaze flicked once more to the cord, then back to Kyle. "If I touch it," she said, choosing each word carefully, "I won't see just her. I'll feel what she felt. Fear, pain, hope, desperation, sometimes all at once." Cale's voice lowered. "I won't stop you if you say no. That's not what I'm afraid of." He waited. Alara's fingers curled. "I'm afraid that once I start, I won't be able to stop, that I'll see something I can't forget." Cale nodded once. "That's a fair fear." Silence stretched between them, thick but not hostile. Outside, the river whispered. The hearth sighed as the last embers dimmed. Alara made her decision the way she made all dangerous decisions, quietly, without ceremony. She stepped out from behind the bar. Cale straightened slightly but didn't rise. Alara approached the table with slow steps, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. She stopped just short of the cord, staring down at it like it might lunge at her. "Before I touch it," she said, "you answer one question. Ask." "If this goes badly," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "if someone learns what I can do, will you protect me?" Kyle didn't answer immediately, not because he was calculating, because he was choosing honesty. "Yes," he said finally, "but not by hiding you in a cage or turning you into a secret weapon. I'll protect you the way you choose to be protected." Elara searched his face. "You swear that?" "I swear it," he said, and something ancient and unbreakable settled into his tone. Elara exhaled slowly, then she reached out. The moment her fingers brushed the braided cord, the world tilted. Not violently, not all at once. It was like sinking into cold water, shock first, then depth. The tavern dissolved. The smell of smoke vanished. Elara was no longer standing on worn floorboards. She was running. Her lungs burned as branches lashed her arms. The forest was alive around her, dark, breathing, closing in. Fear pounded through her body so fiercely it nearly drowned her thoughts. Not her fear, someone else's. A girl, young, strong, despite exhaustion, stumbled over roots, her boots slipping in mud. Her breath came in sharp gasps, chest tight with panic and stubborn determination. "Don't stop! Don't stop!" A shout echoed behind her. Men, boots crashing through undergrowth. Laughter, not kind, never kind. She ran harder. The cord slipped from her hair. "No, no, Papa gave me that." A hand grabbed her arm. Pain exploded. Elara gasped aloud, ripping her hand back. The vision shattered like glass. She staggered, barely aware of Kale moving fast, too fast, his hands catching her shoulders before she could fall. He didn't pull her close. He held her steady, firm but careful, like he knew exactly how much pressure she could bear. Elara sucked in air, heart hammering like she'd run the forest herself. She was running, Elara whispered hoarsely. Through trees. At night. Kale's jaw clenched. She always hated the dark. Elara swallowed hard. She didn't stop. "No," Kyle said. "She wouldn't." Elara's knees weakened. Kale guided her back into the booth, kneeling in front of her so he was eye level, not looming, not above. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Stay here. With me." She obeyed without thinking. Her vision steadied, her hands still trembled. "She lost the cord," Elara said. "It mattered to her." "It was my aunt's," Kyle murmured. "She never took it off." Elara nodded. Her chest felt hollow. "That wasn't all." Kale waited. "There were voices," she continued, "men arguing. One of them said something about keeping her alive." Hope flared painfully in Kale's eyes. "Alive?" "Yes," Elara said, "not kind, not safe, but alive." Kale closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing himself against relief that hurt almost as much as fear. When he opened them, his control was back, but it was cracked now, enough for her to see the grief underneath. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You didn't have to do that." Elara let out a shaky laugh. "Feels like I already did." Kale's gaze flicked to her hand, the one that had touched the cord. "We don't have to continue tonight." Elara followed his gaze. The cord sat where she'd left it, innocent and waiting. Her stomach twisted. "No," she said, "if I stop now I won't sleep. I'll just relive it." Kyle studied her. "Then we'll do this properly." He reached into his coat again, not for another object, but for a small leather flask. He uncorked it and set it on the table. "Water," he said. "Drink." She hesitated, then obeyed. Cool clarity spread through her, grounding her. Kale leaned back slightly, giving her space again. "Tell me what you need." Elara surprised herself by answering honestly. "Time," she said. "And somewhere safer than this to finish." Kale nodded. "Then we leave Frostmere." Her heart jumped. "Now?" "Before anyone else notices what you can do," he said. "Before this town remembers how much it likes burning women for being different." Elara stared at him. Leaving. The word felt impossible, terrifying, liberating. "And if I say no?" she asked quietly. Kale's eyes held hers, steady and sincere. "Then I finish my drink and walk away." Alara looked at the cord, at her hands, at the door she'd locked 1,000 times to keep the world out, and for the first time in years, she wondered what it would feel like to unlock it on purpose. Alara didn't answer right away, because leave Frostmere wasn't a suggestion. It was a door opening in a wall she'd been staring at for years, convinced it was solid stone. Outside, the river kept whispering, pretending it didn't care what choices people made. Inside, the hearth and anchor felt suddenly too small, too familiar, too full of old rules that had never been written down but always enforced. Kale watched her without rushing. It made her want to speak, just to break the silence. "You said you'd walk away," she finally said, voice rough. "Just like that." Kale's gaze didn't flicker. "Yes." Alara's laugh came out thin. "Most men don't offer that." "Most men aren't asking," Kale replied. "They're taking." The words landed like a stone in her stomach because they were true, and because she had lived too many versions of taking to pretend otherwise. Alara's eyes dropped to the cord again. The vision still clung to her skin, the cold bite of branches, the terror in borrowed lungs, the grip on the girl's arm that had felt like iron. Alara's hand ached as if it had been grabbed too. "You said you're searching for family," she murmured. "Why does it sound like war when you say it?" Kale's mouth tightened. "Because it is." Alara stared at him. "A war over one girl?" Kyle didn't look offended. He looked tired in the same deep way he'd looked the moment she noticed him, like someone who hadn't slept properly since the world turned cruel. "Over bloodlines," he said quietly. "Over leverage. Over fear. Over control." Alara swallowed. "And she's useful." Kale's eyes darkened. "To the wrong people." A cold thread slid through Alara's chest. "Then why aren't you using your own people? Why come to a tavern in a border town and ask a nobody like me?" Kale's expression changed, almost imperceptibly. Not contempt, something closer to regret. "Because you aren't a nobody," he said, "and because I can't trust my own people." Alara let out a short breath. "That's comforting." "It shouldn't be," Kyle said, "but it's honest." Alara's fingers flexed. She could still feel the cord's pull, as if it wanted her to touch it again, to fall back into that girl's terror and dig deeper. But Alara had learned long ago, the gift never gave you only what you asked for. It gave you what it wanted, and it always demanded payment. Alara pushed up from the booth, needing movement, needing distance from the cord and the man and the thought of leaving everything she knew. She walked behind the bar again, her boots soft on the worn floorboards. She began to tidy without thinking, stacking the last cups, wiping down the same clean surface as if repetition could make her mind quiet. Kyle didn't stop her. He didn't tell her to sit. He simply stayed where he was, a still presence in the corner, waiting. Alara hated that she wanted to trust him. She hated it even more that she could picture the girl running through the woods and felt, somewhere deep, an ache that was not fear, but recognition. Because Alara had run too, not through forests, through life, running from attention, from questions, from anything that might force her to admit she was different. She reached for the last bottle on the shelf and froze when her fingers brushed the glass. A flicker, quick as a blink. Not a full vision, just an impression, a man's laughter, loud and oily, a hand sliding coin across a table, a voice saying, "She'll pay. She always pays." Alara jerked her hand back as if burned. Her chest tightened. Kale noticed immediately. His posture shifted, subtle, alert. What happened? Alara swallowed. Nothing. Kale didn't press. He waited. That patience was starting to feel dangerous, like it was stripping her defenses without force. Alara exhaled hard. "Sometimes it happens with anything," she admitted. "If I'm tired, if I'm stressed, if my guard slips." Kyle's gaze softened. "You can't turn it off." "I can," Alara lied automatically. Kyle tilted his head slightly, eyes steady. You can suppress it. Alara's mouth tightened. He was right. Suppressing was not the same as control. Suppressing was a clenched fist, and eventually your hand cramped and opened whether you wanted it to or not. Alara turned her back to him, pretending to fuss with the lockbox beneath the counter. It was empty, of course. Old Bram collected the coins. Alara collected the bruises of his words and the fatigue of his expectations. Kyle's voice came softly from the corner. Tell me about your debt. Alara stiffened. That's none of your business. Kyle didn't argue. Then tell me why you can't leave. Alara's hand paused on the lockbox because she couldn't say the truth out loud without feeling ridiculous, without hearing her mother's voice warning her to keep quiet, keep small, keep hidden. People leave Frostmere every day, Kale added gently. You're still here. Alara's throat tightened. She hated that he saw her. She hated that it felt like relief. She slammed the lockbox shut and turned. You want to know why I can't leave? Her voice sharpened. Because I owe a man who enjoys making me feel like I owe him my life. Kale's eyes narrowed. Who? Elric Bramwell, Alara said, spitting the name like bitter herbs. Owner of this place, savior of lost girls, patron of the poor, you know the type. Kale's jaw clenched. What do you owe him? Alara's laugh was short and ugly. My guardian took a loan before he died, to cover medical costs. She used her fingers to mimic quotation marks, then dropped her hand. And when he died, Bramwell said it transferred to me. That's not legal, Kale said flatly. Alara stared at him like he'd said the sky was green. Legal? In Frostmere? Kale's expression darkened. How much? Alara hesitated. The number tasted like shame. Then she forced it out. 200 silver marks. Kyle's brows lifted slightly, not disbelief, but calculation. That's not impossible. Alara's laugh cracked. It is when you're paid scraps and docked for breathing wrong. Kale leaned forward, elbows on the table now. How long? Alara's chest tightened. 5 years. Kale's eyes went cold in a way that made the room feel suddenly smaller. He's been bleeding you for 5 years. Alara forced her shoulders up. Welcome to Frostmere. Kale's voice lowered, and he knows you can't report him. Alara's lips went numb. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Kyle's gaze sharpened. Because he has leverage. Alara stared at the cord again, feeling trapped from all angles. By debt, by fear, by her own secret. She whispered, barely audible. If I disappear, he'll claim I stole from him. He'll send men. He'll drag me back. Or worse, he'll tell people what he suspects. Kale stood. The movement was smooth, controlled, and for the first time, Alara saw just how much space he took up. Not because he was large, though he was, but because his presence had weight. He crossed the room slowly, stopping at the edge of the bar without coming around it, as if respecting her boundary. What does he suspect? Kale asked quietly. Ilara's heart hammered. She should lie. She should laugh it off. She should say she didn't know what he meant and push Kale out the door and lock it behind him and pretend this night never happened. But the cord had already pulled her into someone else's terror, and Kale's eyes, storm gray, honest, unflinching, made lying feel suddenly pointless. Alara swallowed and said the truth in the smallest voice she could manage. He thinks I'm cursed. Kale's gaze didn't change. And you let him think that? Ilara's mouth twisted. I didn't confirm it. I didn't deny it. I just kept my head down. Kale's voice was low. People like Bramwell don't keep secrets out of mercy. Alara felt cold. No, they keep them for profit. Kale nodded once. Then he'll sell yours the moment he thinks he can. Ilara's stomach clenched painfully. She could almost hear it, the town gossip, the accusations, the old superstition rising like smoke. She could almost see a crowd. Her mother, the cord's vision, the hand grabbing the girl's arm. It all braided together inside Alara until she couldn't tell what was past and what was coming. Kyle reached into his coat again. Ilara's body tensed automatically. But he didn't pull a weapon. He pulled a folded piece of parchment, thick, sealed with dark wax. He held it out, not pushing it into her hands, just offering it. Ilara stared at it. "What is that?" "A travel writ," Cale said, "stamped by authorities who don't answer to Frostmere's petty men." Ilara's pulse jumped. "How?" Cale's expression didn't soften. "I told you. This is war." Ilara's fingers twitched, wanting to take it, terrified to accept it. "So you can just make papers appear." Cale's eyes held hers. "I can make obstacles move." Ilara swallowed, voice breaking slightly despite her effort. "And Bramwell?" Cale's answer was calm. Too calm. "I can make him stop." A chill ran through her. It wasn't fear of Cale. It was fear of what it would mean if she let someone powerful fight on her behalf. Because then she wouldn't be able to pretend she was alone anymore. And loneliness had been her armor. Ilara stared at the parchment, then at Cale. "Why are you doing this?" Cale's expression tightened, like the truth cost him. "Because if you come with me," he said quietly, "I need you alive." Ilara's breath caught. Kyle continued, voice steady. "And because I won't ask you to risk yourself while you're still chained to a man like Bramwell." Ilara's throat burned. She looked down at her hands, hands that cleaned tables, poured drinks, counted someone else's coins, and carried a gift she'd never asked for. She looked up again. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Cale didn't hesitate. "Then I leave with what I have, and I keep searching without you." Ilara's eyes flicked to the cord, to the girl running, to the hand grabbing her. Ilara swallowed hard. The truth was, she was already in this. She had touched it. She had seen enough to know the danger was real, and Frostmere Crossing had never protected women like her. Ilara reached out, not to the cord this time, to the parchment. Her fingers closed around it. The moment she touched it, she felt something faint, a residue of intent, of planning, of roots mapped and sealed and signed. No trauma, no terror, just purpose. Ilara exhaled shakily. "Fine," she said, voice barely steady. "If we leave tonight, before dawn." Cale's shoulders eased, just a fraction. "Good," he said softly, "because dawn is when men like Bramwell start looking for what they're missing." Ilara's stomach dropped. Cale's gaze sharpened. "Pack what matters, only what you can carry." Ilara stared at him. "You think he'll come?" Kyle didn't blink. "I know he will." Ilara's heart hammered, and for the first time she understood something terrifying and strange. This wasn't just a chance to find a missing girl. This was the moment Ilara Voss either stayed small forever or stepped into a life that would never let her hide again. Ilara had always believed leaving would feel louder. She thought it would come with shouting, with slammed doors and accusations hurled after her like stones. She thought fear would rush her all at once, sharp and blinding. Instead, leaving Frostmere Crossing felt quiet. Too quiet. She moved through the narrow stairwell above the tavern with a small oil lamp cupped in her hand, the flame trembling with every step. The room she rented sat under the eaves, cramped and slanted, with a window so small it barely counted as one. She had lived here long enough that the walls had memorized her shape. Tonight they felt unfamiliar. Ilara set the lamp on the table and stood still, listening. Below her, the tavern creaked as it always did, settling into sleep. Outside, the river murmured. No raised voices, no boots on the stairs, no sign that Bramwell had noticed anything amiss. Yet. Her chest tightened. Cale's words echoed in her head. Dawn is when men like Bramwell start looking for what they're missing. Ilara swallowed and forced herself to move. She didn't have much to pack. That realization hurt more than she expected. 2 dresses, one for work, one for church days she rarely attended. A wool shawl mended so many times the original pattern was lost. A pair of boots with cracked soles she'd learned to walk gently in. She folded them carefully, not because they were precious, but because they were hers. She paused at the small shelf by the bed. On it sat 3 objects: a comb carved from pale wood, its teeth worn smooth, her mother's; a thin book bound in cracked leather, filled with pressed leaves and flowers, each labeled in a careful hand that had once been steady; and a small pouch of dried herbs she no longer used but couldn't bring herself to throw away. Ilara touched the comb first. Nothing surged. No vision. Just a faint warmth, like memory without pain. She exhaled slowly and tucked it into her bag. The book came next. She hesitated, then slipped it in as well. The pouch lingered in her hand longer. She closed her eyes, fighting the instinct to see, to pry into the past through touch. Not now. Not when she needed to stay herself. She tied the pouch shut and packed it last. Ilara looked around the room one final time. No farewell, no tears. This place had kept her alive, but it had never let her live. She extinguished the lamp and stepped back into the stairwell. Cale waited at the bottom, half in shadow, his coat already on, his posture alert. He looked like someone prepared to move fast and prepared to fight if needed. "You're ready," he said quietly. Ilara nodded. "As I'll ever be." Cale's gaze flicked to the stairs above, then to the tavern's front door. "Then we leave through the back." Ilara frowned. "The alley?" "The river path," Cale corrected. "Less visible, less predictable." Ilara didn't argue. She followed him through the narrow kitchen, past the cold hearth and stacked crates, to the back door she rarely used. The night air rushed in as Cale eased it open, cool and sharp and full of possibility. They stepped outside. Frostmere Crossing looked different at night, smaller, quieter, stripped of the pretense it wore during daylight. Lanterns guttered low, windows glowed faintly, most already dark. Somewhere a dog barked once, then fell silent. Ilara pulled her shawl tighter around herself. Kyle moved with practiced awareness, guiding her along the narrow path beside the river. The water glinted dully under the moon, flowing fast and uncaring. They walked in silence for several minutes. Ilara's heartbeat finally slowed enough for her thoughts to catch up. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. Cale didn't slow. "Out of Bramwell's reach, toward the northern ridge." "That's wolf territory," Ilara said. Cale glanced at her. "Yes." Her mouth went dry. "And you didn't think to mention that earlier?" Cale's lips twitched, barely. "Would it have changed your decision?" Ilara considered it. Images flickered. Her mother's screams, the crowd, the fire, the cord's vision, the grip on the girl's arm. "No," she admitted. Kyle nodded. "Then it didn't need mentioning." They reached a narrow footbridge that arched over the river, its planks slick with moisture. Cale crossed first, testing each step, then turned and offered his hand. Ilara hesitated. She hadn't held someone's hand like that in years, not since before everything went wrong. Cale didn't rush her. His hand stayed extended, steady and open. Ilara placed her hand in his. The contact sent a faint, strange warmth through her, not a vision, not a surge, just a sense of connection. Grounded, present. She crossed without slipping. On the other side, Cale released her immediately, as if he knew better than to linger. They climbed the ridge path as the town fell behind them. Ilara glanced back once, just once, at the cluster of rooftops and dim lights. She felt no regret, only tension. They hadn't gone far when voices carried on the wind. Ilara stiffened. Kyle's hand came up, palm outward. "Stop." They moved off the path and into the brush, crouching behind a stand of young pines. Ilara's breath grew shallow as footsteps approached. Bramwell's voice cut through the night, sharp with irritation. "I told you she was still here. She never leaves without permission." Another man laughed softly. "Maybe she finally learned her place and ran." Bramwell spat. "She owes me, and I always collect." Ilara's stomach twisted. She pressed her hand to the earth, grounding herself, forcing herself not to shake. Kale's posture shifted subtly, coiled, ready, not reckless, controlled. Bramwell's lantern bobbed closer. Ilara could see the shape of him now, broad, smug, surrounded by men who followed because it was easier than thinking. Bramwell paused near the footbridge. "Check the river path," he ordered. "She's clever, thinks she can slip away." Ilara's heart slammed against her ribs. Kale leaned closer, his voice barely a breath against her ear. "Stay still, no matter what." Ilara nodded. Boots crunched on gravel. A man stepped onto the bridge, lantern swinging. For one terrifying second, Ilara thought the light would fall on them, that she would be dragged back by the arm like the girl in the vision. Then Kale moved, not toward the man, away. He shifted the brush behind them with deliberate noise, just enough. The man turned sharply. "Over there." Footsteps veered in the wrong direction. Kale waited 2 breaths, then guided Ilara deeper into the trees, moving fast but quiet, the forest swallowing them whole. They didn't stop until the sounds faded entirely. Ilara leaned against a tree, chest heaving. "That," she whispered, "was too close." Kyle nodded. "Which means we're done walking." He whistled, low, sharp, controlled. A moment later, movement stirred ahead. 2 horses emerged from the darkness, their eyes catching moonlight. Strong, sure-footed, already saddled. Ilara stared. "You planned this." Kale met her gaze. "I hoped for it." He helped her mount with efficiency, never touching more than necessary. Once she was settled, he swung up behind her on his own horse, taking the lead. They rode hard and silent into the night, the forest opening before them like a promise and a threat all at once. As Frostmere vanished behind them, Ilara felt it, the last invisible thread snapping. She was no longer a woman waiting to be claimed. She was moving, and somewhere ahead, the cord waited to be touched again. By the time the sky began to pale, Ilara's body had gone numb in ways she didn't know how to name. Not pain exactly, not fear, awareness. The forest thinned as they climbed, the air sharpening with altitude until every breath felt cleaner and more dangerous at once. Frostmere Crossing was far behind them now. So far it might have been a story someone else told. They rode in silence, broken only by the soft snort of horses and the steady rhythm of hooves against packed earth. Kale never looked back to see if she was keeping up. He rode as though he already knew she would. That knowledge unsettled her more than doubt ever could. When the sun finally crested the ridge, it revealed stone, not a castle, not a fortress, something older. The structure rose directly from the mountain face, carved rather than built, its edges worn smooth by centuries of wind and time. It didn't announce itself. It didn't dominate the landscape. It belonged to it. Ilara slowed her horse without meaning to. Kyle noticed. "Stonevale," he said. "We're safe here." Safe? The word landed oddly in her chest. They passed through a narrow cleft in the rock where the path disappeared entirely, swallowed by shadow. Ilara felt it immediately. The pressure change, the quiet thickening, like the mountain itself was listening. As they emerged into a hidden basin, the keep revealed itself fully. Not grand, intentional. Stone walls curved inward, embracing the courtyard rather than enclosing it. Smoke curled lazily from vents cut high into the rock. People moved through the space with purpose but without urgency, some carrying baskets, others training with wooden weapons, others simply talking. No fear, no scrambling, no one stared when Kyle rode in. That alone told Ilara everything. Kyle dismounted smoothly and turned, offering his hand again. This time she didn't hesitate. The moment her boots hit stone, a strange sensation rippled through her, like the ground recognized her weight. She shook it off. "Don't imagine things." A woman with gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes approached, wiping her hands on a cloth. She took in Ilara's travel-worn clothes, the tension in her posture, the way her gaze tracked everything at once. Then she nodded once. "You'll want water," the woman said, "and something warm." Alara blinked. I'm Vera, the woman added, and you look like someone who hasn't slept properly in years. Alara almost laughed. Kyle inclined his head. Thank you. Vera glanced at him sideways. You brought trouble with you. Kale didn't deny it. Yes. Vera's eyes flicked back to Alara, not suspicious, not unkind. Assessing. Good, she said. We were getting bored. She gestured toward the interior passage carved into the stone. Come, you can rest before the mountain decides you're weak. Alara followed, her steps echoing softly as they entered the keep. Inside, the air was warmer, infused with the scent of clean smoke, herbs, and stone that had never known rot. Light filtered down through narrow shafts cut into the rock, illuminating walls etched with symbols she didn't recognize but felt rather than saw. Kale noticed her attention. Old markers, he said. For protection. Alara swallowed. Against what? Kale met her gaze. People who misuse power. That answer sent a chill through her, not because it was ominous, but because it was specific. They reached a small chamber with a bed built directly into the stone wall, piled high with thick blankets. A copper basin sat nearby, already steaming. Alara stopped short. This is too much. Kale frowned slightly. It's a bed and water. For someone like me? She said. That counts as luxury. Kale's expression softened. Not pity, but something closer to anger on her behalf. You're not as someone like you think. Alara looked away, suddenly exhausted. I need to wash. Kale nodded immediately and stepped back. I'll be outside. He didn't linger, didn't pretend an excuse. He simply left. The door slid shut behind him with a soft stone-on-stone sound. Alara stood alone, staring at the basin. Her reflection wavered in the water, eyes too alert, shoulders too tight, a woman braced for impact even when nothing was striking. She undressed slowly, folding her clothes with care, then eased into the bath. The heat stole her breath. For a moment, all she could do was sit there, muscles screaming in relief, the tension of years melting in a way that almost hurt more than it healed. She pressed her forehead to the rim of the basin and let herself breathe. Not cry, just breathe. When she emerged, wrapped in borrowed linens, she felt lighter, still wary, but present. Kale waited where he'd said he would, leaning against the corridor wall, arms crossed loosely, gaze lifting the instant he sensed her approach. You look steadier, he said. Alara nodded. For now. He gestured down the passage. Come. There's something you should see before we continue. They walked deeper into the keep, descending rather than climbing, until the air grew cooler and the stone darker. Kyle stopped before a wide chamber carved entirely into the mountain's heart. At its center stood a long stone table. On it lay objects. Not many, but enough. Alara's pulse quickened. She knew without being told. These are things taken from border raids, Kale said quietly. Recovered, traded, stolen back. Items that passed through many hands. Her mouth went dry. You want me to… Only when you're ready, Kale interrupted. And only what you choose. Alara approached slowly. The cord was there, cleaned, laid carefully beside other objects, a torn scrap of cloth, a cracked button, a small metal clasp bent out of shape. The pull inside her flared, stronger than before. She closed her eyes. Not yet. Kyle watched her, unreadable. You don't owe me answers today. Alara opened her eyes again. Yes, I do. Kyle stiffened slightly. Why? Because every moment I wait, she said softly, someone else suffers. Kale didn't argue. He stepped back, giving her space. Alara reached out. This time she touched the scrap of cloth. The vision slammed into her. Not running, waiting. Stone walls, cold, damp. A girl sitting on the floor, knees drawn up, whispering to herself to stay awake, to remember her name, to remember her family. Men arguing nearby, not shouting, not cruel for sport. Calculating. She's valuable alive. How long? Until he breaks. Alara gasped, fingers slipping. Kale was there instantly, not touching, not restraining, just close enough that she could anchor herself to his presence. She's alive, Alara said hoarsely, held somewhere underground, not far from water. They think time will weaken him. Kale's jaw clenched. They're wrong. Alara nodded faintly. Yes, they are. She wiped her shaking hands against her borrowed tunic and forced herself to meet his gaze. Kale, she said quietly, whatever this is, it's bigger than one rescue. Kale's eyes darkened, not with fear, but recognition. I know. Alara took a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Then we need to be careful, she said, because if they realize what I can do, Kale's voice was steady, unyielding. Then they'll have to get through me first. Alara believed him. That belief frightened her more than the visions ever could, because protection felt dangerously close to trust, and trust, once given, could not be taken back. At this point, I need to know, what would you do? Would you run, or would you stand your ground like Alara? Tell me in the comments, because the choice she makes next changes everything. Alara didn't sleep. She lay on the stone bed long after the keep had settled into its night rhythms, staring at the ceiling where shadows moved like slow thoughts. Every time she closed her eyes, the girl's whisper returned, "Stay awake, remember your name," and Alara felt the words settle into her bones. This wasn't just sight, it was inheritance. At some point before dawn, the mountain shifted, not violently, not enough to wake anyone else, just a low, distant settling, like a great creature adjusting its weight. Alara felt it through the bed, a subtle tremor that ran up her spine and left her breath caught halfway in. She sat up. The chamber was dim, lit only by a narrow shaft of moonlight. For a moment, Alara wondered if exhaustion had finally tipped her into imagining things. Then she felt it again. A pull, not the sharp yank of the cord's memory, not the drowning rush of a vision. This was quieter, directional, like someone standing behind a door, waiting. Alara swung her legs over the side of the bed and padded barefoot into the corridor, her borrowed tunic brushing her knees. The stone beneath her feet was cool, steady. The keep was not asleep, but it wasn't awake either. Soft footsteps echoed somewhere far above. A murmur of voices drifted and faded. No one stopped her. It occurred to Alara, distantly, that this place did not cage people. It trusted them to know where they were allowed to go. The pull led her downward. She followed it past familiar passages, deeper than the chamber where the table of objects lay, into older stone where the air smelled faintly of iron and damp earth. Symbols carved into the walls grew denser here, overlapping and worn smooth by hands that had traced them for centuries. Alara stopped at an archway she hadn't seen before. Beyond it, the mountain opened into a cavern, not a natural one. The walls curved deliberately, shaped into a wide, circular chamber where a shallow pool reflected the faint glow of crystalline veins in the rock above. The water was perfectly still, dark as ink. Ilara's breath caught. She didn't need to touch anything to feel it. This place held memory, not objects, not moments, people. She took one step forward and froze. Kale stood at the edge of the pool, his back to her, shoulders bare beneath a loose shirt as if he'd come down here without armor, without rank. His posture was rigid, his hands braced against the stone rim like he was holding something in place. Ilara hesitated. She hadn't expected him. She hadn't expected anyone. Kale sensed her presence without turning. His voice came low, measured. "You felt it too." Ilara swallowed. "I didn't mean to—" "I know," he said. "Neither did I." She approached slowly, stopping several paces away. The water reflected both of them now, two figures distorted by depth and shadow. "What is this place?" she asked. Kale straightened and finally turned to face her. In the strange light, his eyes looked almost silver. "It's called the Listening Well," he said. "Older than the keep, older than my family." Ilara's pulse quickened. Listening to what? Kyle's gaze dropped to the pool, to those who were silenced. A shiver ran through her. Ilara crouched beside the water, careful not to touch it. The surface didn't ripple. It waited. I can feel echoes, she said quietly, not like visions, more like pressure. Kale nodded. This place amplifies what's already there. It doesn't create, it reveals. Ilara's mouth went dry. Then why bring me here? Kale met her eyes. I didn't. Silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. So the mountain called us both, Ilara said. Yes. She studied his face, the lines of control pulled tight. Does it always do that? No, Kale said. Only when something is out of balance. Ilara looked back at the pool. The girl, the cord, the underground cell, the men who calculated suffering like currency. Balance. She hugged her arms around herself. This isn't just about your family, is it? Kale didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried weight. No, it's about a fracture that's been spreading for years. My exile was a symptom, not a cause. Ilara turned to him. And I'm part of that? Kyle hesitated. That was answer enough. Ilara let out a slow breath. You should have told me. Yes, he said quietly. I should have. She searched his face, not for guilt, but for intent. Are you using me? Kyle stepped back as if struck. No. Then what am I to you? Ilara asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. The cavern seemed to hold its breath. Kale's jaw tightened. You're someone who was taught to disappear to survive, he said, and who somehow survived without becoming cruel. Ilara blinked. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have right now, Kyle said. Anything else would be a promise I'm not ready to make. Ilara nodded slowly. She respected that. The pull intensified suddenly, sharp enough that she gasped. The pool rippled. Ilara flinched back, but Kale was already moving, positioning himself between her and the water without touching her. Stay with me, he said. If it comes, don't fight it. Anchor. Ilara's heart hammered. Anchor to what? To me, Kyle said simply. She should have questioned that. She didn't. The water darkened, then lightened, images forming beneath the surface like ink stirred into milk. Ilara saw stone again, different stone, carved arches, a corridor sloping downward, torches burning low. She saw the girl, older than before, thinner but upright, watching, waiting. And something else. A symbol etched into a wall near the cell, repeated, intentional. Ilara cried out, gripping the edge of the stone as the vision sharpened. Kale, she gasped, they're not just holding her. I know, he said, voice steady in her ear. They're testing something, Ilara whispered. Blood, lineage, they believe she can unlock something. Kale went still. What kind of something? He asked. Ilara swallowed hard. The same kind the mountain protects. Silence crashed down like a dropped blade. Kale's hands clenched. They're trying to force a response. Yes, Ilara said. And if they succeed? The vision shattered, leaving the pool dark and still once more. Ilara sagged, breath ragged. Kyle caught her, not tightly, not possessively, just enough to keep her upright. The warmth of him grounded her instantly, the pull receding like a tide. She pressed her forehead briefly to his shoulder, then pulled back, embarrassed. I'm sorry, she murmured. Don't be, Kyle said. You just confirmed what I feared. Ilara looked up at him. Then what happens now? Kale's gaze hardened, not with anger, but resolve. Now we move before they do. Ilara nodded, exhaustion and purpose tangling in her chest. And if they come for me? Kale didn't hesitate. Then the mountain won't be the only thing that answers. They stood there in the listening chamber, two people bound not by fate, but by choice, by danger, by truths finally spoken aloud. Above them, the keep slept on, unaware that the quiet war had just crossed a line. Stonevale did not panic. That was the first thing Ilara noticed when Kyle called the council at dawn. There was no scrambling of feet, no shouted orders echoing through the halls. People arrived in ones and twos, calm but alert, eyes sharp with purpose. Weapons were brought, not raised. Maps were unrolled, not slammed down. Voices stayed low. This was a place that had learned how to survive without announcing fear. Ilara stood near the wall of the council chamber, hands folded tightly in front of her, listening as Kale spoke. He didn't waste words. He never did. "They know where the girl is," he said, gesturing briefly toward Ilara. "They're accelerating their timeline." A murmur rippled through the room, not surprise, but recognition. Vera leaned forward, palms braced on the table. "Then we move tonight." "Yes," Kale said, "but not loud, and not many." A younger man frowned. "If they're testing bloodlines, they want a reaction," Kale cut in. "If we storm the place, we give them exactly that." Ilara swallowed. All eyes turned toward her, not accusing, not worshipful, assessing, respectful. Vera's gaze softened slightly. "How far can you see?" she asked Ilara. Ilara hesitated, then answered honestly. "Farther than I want to, less than they think." A faint smile touched Vera's mouth. "Good, that means you're still human." Kyle turned to Ilara. "You don't have to come." Ilara's chest tightened. "Yes, I do." Silence fell. Kyle studied her for a long moment, searching for fear masquerading as resolve. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him. "Then we prepare," he said. The rest of the day unfolded like a held breath. Ilara was given quiet instructions, not commands, where to stand, when to stop, what to do if the pull became overwhelming. No one touched her without asking. No one treated her like a tool. That respect settled into her bones more deeply than any vision ever had. As dusk bled into night, Kale came for her. He didn't knock. He stood in the doorway, framed by torchlight, armor dark and unadorned, not ceremonial, practical. "Are you ready?" he asked. Ilara adjusted the strap of the small satchel at her side. "No." Kyle nodded. "Good. Ready is often careless." They moved out through a narrow passage that led beyond the keep's outer ring, descending into a network of old paths carved long before Frostmere Crossing had a name. The air grew damp, cool, smelling of moss and iron. Ilara felt it again, the directional pull, faint but insistent. "This way," she whispered. Kale followed without question. They traveled light. Only 4 others accompanied them, shadows more than people, moving with quiet efficiency. Ilara learned their names only in fragments, and that was enough. The path ended at a cliff overlooking a ravine. Below, torchlight flickered at the mouth of a stone structure half hidden by rock and brush. Ilara's heart thudded painfully. "That's it," she said. "They're underground." Kale's gaze sharpened. "Stay with me." They descended slowly, using narrow ledges and old iron spikes embedded in stone. Ilara focused on Kale's movements, measured, deliberate, letting his steadiness anchor her when the ground seemed to tilt. At the entrance, Kale raised a hand. They waited. Voices drifted up from below. Men arguing, bored, overconfident. Ilara's stomach churned. The pull surged suddenly, violent enough that she gasped and grabbed Kale's arm. He stilled instantly. "What do you see?" "Movement," she whispered. "They're taking her out of the cell. Not far, not yet." Kale didn't hesitate. He signaled. The team moved. It happened fast and quiet, too fast for Ilara to track every detail. A guard slumped soundlessly. A torch guttered out. Stone swallowed noise the way it had swallowed secrets for years. They reached the lower corridor just as voices rose in alarm. "Where did the light go?" The rest was chaos. Ilara pressed herself against the wall as Kale surged forward, controlled fury in every movement. He didn't roar. He didn't lose himself. He dismantled resistance with precision that spoke of long restraint. Then she saw her. The girl. She was thinner than in the visions, hair tangled, wrists bound, but her eyes were bright, sharp, alive, their gazes locked. The pull snapped tight. Elara staggered as the vision flooded her, not fear this time, but recognition. The girl stared at Elara like she'd been waiting for her. "You came," the girl whispered, not aloud, but somewhere deeper. "Yes," Elara breathed. "We did." Kale turned sharply. "Elara, they marked her," Elara said urgently, "with symbols. She's carrying something they planted." Kale swore under his breath. "We don't have time." The girl cried out suddenly as one of the remaining men lunged for her. Elara didn't think. She stepped forward and grabbed the man's sleeve. The vision hit like a hammer. Not his past, his intention. Fear, greed, obedience. Elara recoiled with a cry, but it was enough. Kale was there in an instant, the threat neutralized before it could finish forming. Silence fell. The girl sagged, shaking. Kyle knelt, cutting her bindings carefully. "You're safe," he said softly. "I swear it." The girl looked at him, then at Elara. "You're the one," she whispered to Elara. "The mountain told me." Elara's throat tightened. "It doesn't speak in words," she said gently. "Just pulls." The girl nodded weakly. "That's enough." They moved quickly after that, retreating the way they came as alarms finally rang behind them. No pursuit followed. Not immediately. By the time they reached the ravine's edge, the sky was lightening. The girl leaned heavily on Kyle, exhaustion finally winning. Elara watched them, chest tight with relief and dread tangled together. This wasn't over. She could feel it. The mountain had answered, but so would those who had been challenged, and they would not stay quiet for long. They did not return to Stonevale by the same path. Kale ordered the change without explanation, and no one questioned him. Elara understood why the moment they crossed into the low forest beyond the ravine. The pull was still there, weaker now but unsettled, like disturbed water that had not yet gone still. The rescued girl, her name was Mireia, rode ahead on Kyle's horse, wrapped in a thick cloak. She swayed with exhaustion but did not sleep. Her eyes tracked everything: trees, shadows, the men who flanked them, a survivor's vigilance. Elara walked beside Kale, boots sinking into damp earth. Her body ached in ways that went beyond muscle. Each vision left a residue, and tonight's had cut deeper than most. "You should rest when we stop," Kale said quietly. "I will," Elara replied, though they both knew she wouldn't, not fully. They made camp just before dawn in a narrow hollow shielded by rock and pine. No fires, cold food, minimal sound. Kale positioned guards personally before sitting beside Elara on a fallen log. For a while neither spoke. Then Kale said, "You saved her." Elara shook her head. "I pointed. You acted." "That distinction matters to you," he said, "not to me." She looked at him then, really looked, dark circles beneath his eyes, dried blood on his sleeve that wasn't his. "Why were they so calm?" she asked. "The men inside, they weren't panicked until we were already there." Kale's jaw tightened, "Because this wasn't their only sight." The words landed like stone. Elara's breath hitched. "There are others." "Yes. And they'll move them now." "Yes." Silence pressed in. Mireia stirred, sitting upright suddenly. "They won't move yet," she said hoarsely. Kyle turned. "How do you know?" "Because I wasn't the end," Mireia replied. "I was the test." Elara felt the truth of it instantly, like a blade sliding into place. "What kind of test?" Elara asked gently. Mireia's fingers curled into the cloak. "They wanted to see who would come, how fast, how far you'd go." Kyle exhaled slowly. "They wanted me." Mireia nodded. "They always talked about you, about how the mountain chose wrong, about how blood should answer blood." Elara's stomach twisted. Kyle stood abruptly, pacing once before forcing himself still. "Did they say names?" "Yes," Mireia swallowed. "But not ones you'll recognize." Elara's head snapped up. "I might." Mireia looked at her, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. "They called themselves the Quiet Line." The pull surged violently. Elara cried out, collapsing to her knees as the vision slammed into her, faster, harsher than before. Stone corridors branching endlessly, children, marks burned into skin, not symbols of control, but of mapping. People weren't being taken to be ruled. They were being charted, tracked, prepared. Ilara gasped, clawing at the earth as Kale caught her shoulders. "Tell me," he said urgently. "Ilara, stay with me." "They're not building an army," she choked. "They're building a signal." Kale froze. "Explain." "They're linking people like nodes, bloodlines, gifts, latent traits. They don't want obedience. They want resonance." Mireya whispered, "They said the mountain would sing." Ilara looked up, terror and certainty burning together. "And they think I'm the key." The camp fell deadly quiet. Kale straightened slowly. "No." Ilara met his gaze. "They already know about me. That wasn't luck. That cellar wasn't coincidence." "They will not have you," Kyle said, voice iron hard. "You can't protect me from a pull that exists inside my bones," Ilara replied. "Only teach me how to stand inside it." Kyle turned away, hands clenched, fighting something that looked dangerously like fear. "I lost my parents because they underestimated a quiet enemy," he said. "I will not lose you the same way." Ilara rose, stepping into his space. "You won't lose me by trusting me either." Their eyes locked. Something shifted, not the bond, but the balance. Mireya watched them closely. "They're coming," she said. "Not tonight, but soon, and not with blades." Kyle looked back at her. "How?" "Envoys, deals, promises." Her mouth twisted. "They always offer safety first." Ilara felt it then, the shape of the next threat. "They'll try to make this political," she said. "Legitimate, invisible." Kyle nodded grimly. "Which means we need proof." "And leverage," Ilara added. Mireya hesitated. "I can help." Kale studied her. "You've done enough." "I haven't," Mireya said firmly. "They taught me things they shouldn't have. I listened because I had no choice." Ilara felt a strange steadiness settle over her. "Then we stop running." Kale looked between them, two women marked by survival, standing unbroken. "Then we prepare Stonevale for war," he said quietly. "Not war," Ilara corrected. "Exposure." The mountain did not roar. It waited. And somewhere beyond the trees, the quiet line began to realize that their test had failed, because the girl they took had come back, and the woman they sought had chosen to stand. Stonevale woke differently that morning. There were no bells, no calls to arms, no visible signs of alarm, yet something had shifted. The keep breathed more slowly, as if it were listening. Ilara felt it the moment she stepped into the upper courtyard. People paused when they saw her, not in awe, not in fear, in recognition. Word had traveled faster than footsteps ever could. The girl had been brought back. The tunnels beneath Frostmere Crossing were no longer a rumor, and the woman who walked beside the Alpha King was no longer invisible. Mireya rested in the infirmary, guarded but not confined. She slept deeply for the first time since her capture, her body finally allowing itself to believe she might wake safely. Ilara stood at the stone railing overlooking the valley when Kale joined her. "They've already sent feelers," he said quietly. Ilara didn't turn. "Letters?" "Messengers," carefully worded, concerned. His mouth tightened. "They want to talk." Ilara exhaled slowly. "Of course they do." The quiet line would not arrive with chains or threats. They would arrive with courtesy, with reason, with the language of order and protection. They would claim the mountain needed guidance. That power left unshaped was dangerous, that she was dangerous. Kale watched her closely. "We can refuse them, shut the gates." "And confirm every fear they're selling," Ilara replied. "No, if they want to speak, we let them." His shoulders stiffened. "I won't offer you to them." "You won't," she agreed. "I will offer myself." The words landed heavy between them. Kale turned fully toward her. "Ilara." "Listen to me," she said softly, but there was steel beneath it now. "They don't want me because I'm weak. They want me because I'm rare, because I don't break when I see what people hide. That's exactly why I won't risk you. She met his gaze without flinching. You already have. Silence stretched. Kyle searched her face for doubt, for hesitation. He found none. Only resolve sharpened by choice, not fear. What are you proposing? He asked finally. Elara turned toward the valley, where the mountain dropped away into mist. We let them come, we let them speak, and then we let them see me. Kale's jaw clenched. They'll try to provoke a reaction. I won't give them one, she said. I'll give them truth. And if they try to take you? They won't, Elara replied. Not in front of witnesses. Not when I make it clear what happens if I disappear. He frowned. You're thinking several moves ahead. I have to, she said. That's what surviving teaches you. Kyle said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, You've changed. Elara smiled faintly. So have you. He took her hand, not possessively, not protectively, as an equal. When this is done, he said, Stonevale will never be the same. Elara squeezed his fingers. Good. The envoys arrived at midday, 3 of them, unarmed, impeccably dressed, smiling. They bowed deeply to Kyle, then turned their attention to Elara with polite curiosity, measuring her the way merchants measured silk. We're grateful for the opportunity to speak, their leader said smoothly. There has been misunderstanding. Elara stepped forward before Kale could respond. No, she said calmly. There has been ambition. The smile faltered, just a fraction. They spoke of balance, of safety, of the dangers of uncontrolled resonance, of how the world needed systems to survive what was awakening. Elara listened without interruption. Then she reached out and touched the edge of the table between them. The room shifted, not violently, not painfully. The envoys gasped as fragments of memory brushed their minds, not secrets, not guilt. Consequence. They felt the people they had catalogued, the children who cried in the dark, the fear they had rationalized as necessity. Elara withdrew her hand. You are not wrong about one thing, she said quietly. What's waking cannot be caged, but it also cannot be mapped like livestock. The leader swallowed hard. You don't understand what's coming. I do, Elara replied. Better than you. She straightened, voice carrying through the chamber. And here is what will happen next. You will dismantle your network. You will release every name you've recorded. You will walk away from the mountain and never return. The envoys stared at her in stunned silence. And if we refuse? One asked shakily. Elara's gaze sharpened, not cruel, not threatening, absolute. Then everyone you've ever touched will remember you, she said, not as protectors, but as predators. Kale stepped forward then, power rolling off him like a drawn blade. You came here seeking leverage. You found a reckoning. The envoys left without another word. Stonevale exhaled. That night, Elara returned to the battlements alone. Kale found her there, moonlight silvering the stone. You ended it, he said. She shook her head. No, I ended their version of it. He studied her, pride and awe warring in his eyes. What about yours? Elara looked out over the land, no longer pulling, no longer whispering, just present. I choose to stay, she said. Not because the mountain bound me, not because you asked. She turned to him. But because this place needs someone who sees what others won't. Kyle reached for her, resting his forehead against hers. And what do you need? Elara smiled, soft, certain, unafraid. A future where choice matters. The mountain did not sing. It stood. And for the first time in generations, it stood free. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel seen, stronger, or less alone, subscribe. These stories are for people who've survived quietly and are still standing, and I'd love to have you here for the next one.